Youth Service Bureau's Partner in Parenting podcast. My name is Mary Gugesberg, and my guest today is Dr. Daniel Khoury with Central Peds out of the Woodbury location. Let me tell you a little bit about what we're going to talk about, but first, Youth Service Bureau. We've been around for over 40 years. The mission of Youth Service Bureau is helping youth and families learn the skills they need to be more successful at home, in school, and throughout their communities. We do that through mental health counseling for kids 4 to 25 years old. We have diversion services, really giving kids that second chance. School-based chemical health for clinical care and prevention. And we have mental health in our schools as well. And then I'm the education coordinator. So you will see me, we have 3 offices. We cross paths with Dr. Khoury in the Woodbury locations. We also have offices in Stillwater and Cottage Grove. And like our recording today, our services are also all available virtually. So I will invite Dr. Khoury to introduce himself. But first, we're going to talk about the importance of sleep. Wow. Sleep for our kids and how much sleep is needed, and really parents, caregivers, what we can do to support our kids. So with that, Dr. Khoury, can you please introduce yourself and we'll jump right in.
Sure, Mary. I appreciate the introduction and the opportunity to be here today. I've been a pediatrician in the East Metro area for the last 25 years, and all of that has been with Central Pediatrics. We have a Woodbury location, and we also have our St. Paul office, which is in Rosevile now. And we provide services for children from birth through college in most cases.
Nice, beautiful. Well, and the reason the topic even came up is I know you and I crossed paths at a previous event, and I remember us talking about how important sleep is to our kids' full character, well, their physical growth, of course, but ultimately then what connected us is their emotional development. So let's talk a little bit about why do we as a caregiver even need to be concerned? If my kid's not tired, I shouldn't worry, should I?
Well, sleep is a critical function that regulates so many of our bodily and mental functions. And I think, unfortunately, it's become taken for granted and not given the importance that it deserves. I mean, a lot of the physical and mental health problems that we see and are beginning to even realize more are related to a lack of sleep. Sleep deprivation is undoubtedly one of the biggest crises in our country.
Sure. So tell me, what are some of those crises that I should be in tune to?
Well, poor sleep can certainly affect your ability to function in an academic situation. We know that the less sleep you get, executive mind functions are compromised. Lack of sleep in the teenage population, for example, can cause an increased likelihood of car accidents. We think that lack of sleep is probably a contributor to obesity. We think that a lot of mental health issues that we see, anxiety, ADHD, are probably directly, if not cause and effect with things like ADHD and anxiety, depression.
Mm-hmm.
So a number of clinical problems or disorders that we see are likely greatly related to sleep deprivation.
Well, and I think that ties so well with the importance of having our conversation. We met because when we had our initial conversation around this, I remember being on that emotional side. I think your story, correct me if my memory is popping back incorrectly, but I remember you saying families would come to me thinking my child has ADHD, and you're like, let's rewind. Let's have a conversation of what else is happening. And many times you share with me it was sleep.
Yeah, and I think that happens more and more than we really give it credit for.
Yeah.
I think that if you look at the rates of some of the mental health disorders that we diagnose and have increased so dramatically, there's a lot of people arguing that they're a direct result of this sleep deprivation. I want to put out a plug for one of the just a great chapter in a book that I think every parent should read. The book is NurtureShock, and the chapter is called The Lost Hour. And it's a nice chapter that will discuss in great detail what the lack of sleep has done to not only the U.S. but the world in the last 30 or 40 years, and that the incidence of things like the obesity, like the ADHD, like the anxiety, are sometimes cause and effect with the sleep deprivation.
Well, I'll add that title in our description here so that if a caregiver is interested, they'll know where to find it. So thank you. I love resources. I'm all about equipping people to have the tools.
You'll love this chapter. I mean, it is really interesting, and interestingly enough, a lot of the studies that they comment on were studies that were performed here in Minnesota.
Oh, great.
There was an elegant study that they looked at in Edina high school students. They took the top 10% of those classes, and they looked at the sleep patterns of those and compared what happened when they were given an extra half hour to an hour of sleep, and their SAT scores rose dramatically from one year to another. It was phenomenal.
Perfect example. Thank you. Yeah, I will add that. So that's a perfect thing. Let's jump to the first. One of my wonderings is how much sleep is recommended? Maybe we can talk about at each developmental stage if we can.
Certainly. I mean, the amount of sleep does vary with age. We expect a newborn to sleep roughly 18 to 20 hours per day. By the time they get to be to 1 to 2 years and 3 to 4 years, we expect that to be anywhere from 13 to 14 hours. We really hope that the elementary school kids from the age of 4 to 6 are sleeping at least 12 hours. We hope 10 to 12 hours for those 6 to 12-year-olds, and we really believe that adolescents should get at least 9 hours of sleep as well.
Being a parent of now young adults, but boy, I remember the attitude. I could tell when they didn't have enough sleep, and
Sure.
yeah, that certainly played into it. So maybe that's kind of, maybe we've already touched on this, but what do you see or any other consequences of all of us not getting enough sleep? And I mean, adults have consequences too, right?
Yeah, again, I think that a lot of times we don't realize the consequences until we get better sleep. So I do think that we live in a world that's chronically sleep deprived. And I would say the focus, obviously, as a pediatrician, there's different stages, and when we talk about that amount of sleep and at different stages and cycles of life, what the particular sleep problems are. I think in the case that you and I have discussed sleep before, it's revolved around that adolescent child and some of the mental health issues that they have. Not only is there an expected or a desired amount of sleep at different age groups, there's also different types of sleep that those age groups have. So, for instance, a newborn baby spends about half the time in REM sleep and half the time in non-REM sleep, and that REM sleep is very restless. So, we get parents that come in concerned that their baby isn't getting any sleep because they're moving all over the place, when that's just the way they sleep at that age. And conversely, the problem with adolescents is that they get less sleep, and it's less restorative types of sleep and stages of sleep. And they probably also have what we call an inherent sleep phase delay, where they really are built at that age to stay up a little bit later and sleep a little bit later. So unfortunately, you have that combined with the fact that in society today, they're pushed to do all their sports and homeworks late into the evening. The school start times are probably too early for those high school students, which is a whole nother discussion. And I guess the badge of honor as a teenager is to see how late you can stay up on the weekends and how late you can sleep those next mornings, and that all affects the way that your able to wake up and perform. So when you ask that, I mean, that's a complicated question to answer. So um, imagine if I told you to wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning and do your job.
Yeah, exhausting,
So
exhausting
what
just to
happens
think
with
about
those
it.
teenagers who get that sleep phase delayed is that's basically what you're asking them to do at 7 o'clock in the morning. If they've gotten used to going to bed at 1 or 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, when you're asking them to wake up and go to school,
Mhm.
they're still in a sleep phase. So they just cannot perform at the same capacity that they would if they had completed that sleep cycle and biologically are ready to start the day.
Sure. So um, maybe I have two questions. First off, online learning. We're in this hybrid distance learning season right now. Um, Knowing what we know, how would I best support my child and the teaching staff? Of course, I want educators to be supported as well. What would be a healthy guidance in my own home?
Well, I think that biologically,
Mhm.
um, there is that certain amount of hours we expect someone to sleep. Even if a teenager can't get 9, if they're getting 7 or 8 hours of sleep, that's certainly better than 4 or 5.
Mhm.
And I think that it probably makes sense in online learning when they have a little bit of flexibility to find out what their natural sleep phase would be. And then in that case, there are probably some modifications you can make. The big thing is you want consistency, and you want the thing that's going to affect the biological clock most significantly is light. So getting up in the morning, um, opening the shades, using potentially, a therapeutic light to simulate morning, no matter what time it is that they're waking, so that that sleep cycle is a little bit more consistent. I mean, the world lives on different sleep phases, but it doesn't make sense for them to wake up at noon or 1 o'clock. It's just not the way that they can live forever. But I do think we did actually see some real positive benefit for some of those kids that were shifted, that had the ability now to sleep till 9 or 10. And these kids came in well rested for the first time in years, because they were able to sleep that full 8 or 9 hours.
Mhm. Yeah, I like when you just said that consistency. That would be one thing too. I was wondering when you said how that natural sleep schedule, how do we learn that?
Well, when you say learn that, I mean, I think we adapt
Okay.
and potentially change, and in a bad way, that schedule. I mean, if I could back up a little bit, the reason we don't have problems in the elementary school is as parents, we have much greater control, right? So we can determine what time their bedtime is.
Mhm.
We can take away their electronics with a little less fuss. Whereas you get to those teenage years, and again, not only do they have probably that inherent shift,
Mhm.
but we don't necessarily put them to bed. We put them in the room, and in many cases, they're going in there with their phone or their computer or their TV, and that's really negatively impacting when they get to bed. In that 24-hour period of time, I mean, we are built to sleep probably close to that 9-hour mark. So most people, if left to their devices, will get that. It might just be at different phases. There's very few people with true sleep disorders. So I think, especially if you want to try to shift that into a more normal way of sleeping, you have to determine what the best sleep time for that kid has become and what time has been the best wake up time. And then, either adapt life around them for that, which I guess not ideal, but in this world with the online learning is conceivably a good option, versus taking that information and then slowly dialing it back to what we would consider a more regular time.
I appreciate that you did talk about devices because our screens, I'm a firm believer, are seriously interrupting our sleep patterns. The number of parents when I give my parent ed classes and I'm like, where's your phone when you're going to bed at night? And they're like, well, that's my alarm clock. It's on my nightstand. And I'm like, we still practice the same thing with our kids that we do, and they're young adults, as we
Sure.
do for each other. And our screens are not in our room. Your bedroom is for sleeping. Now, my kids did their digital learning in their bedrooms too, because that's was privacy. We're working from home, but they knew their screens when they went to bed at night. No screens. So maybe that's another help in guiding our kids to that natural, having those natural rhythms in their own, setting their own.
Yeah, I mean, when you asked me earlier what parents can do, I think everything that we can do to try to encourage that natural rhythm is the right thing to do. So I love that statement that you made. The bedroom should be made for sleeping. So it should be dark at nighttime. It should be bright in the mornings. It should be free of those electronics. It should be as soundproof as it can be. And you don't want to take your worries into the bedroom at night. So good opportunity for parents to kind of discuss those things that are on their children's mind earlier in the evening. I mean, the other thing that we've really lost, I think, in the last few decades has been that dinner hour, where traditionally, we sat down as a family, everybody had their chance to voice their opinions or their concerns, and I think in many cases get some things off their mind, and now they take all that to the room by themselves, and it makes it difficult to sleep as well.
Yeah. Dr. Khoury, you highlight another thing that I know our therapists call out and our school-based staff is the importance of family dinners. And my kids, well, pre-COVID, everywhere, running every which way. So we tried to do at least family dinner, whether it was Friday night or Sunday night. They still had their things they were going to go do, but boy, that I needed as a parent. But I'm try to be as much an advocate for the importance of their mental health and their sleep schedules, to remind them that, hey, that's why we don't put screens in our bedrooms. That's why, we have still in their 20s, I have a bedtime routine with them that I still do when they're home. So
Right.
it's important.
It is important. Well,
Um,
and the other thing is knowledge. I mean, and I think as pediatricians, we have not been as effective as really highlighting the importance of sleep and the dangers of not getting enough sleep, and really encouraging parents to learn more about normal sleep and why you need it, and things that you can do to impress that upon your kids at an earlier age. If you try talking to them about it when they're 17 and have already been a crappy sleeper for a few years, you're just not going to change. And the kids need to buy into it too. I mean, they do all they can to diet and exercise and lift weights and run. But the truth is, getting a lack of sleep is sabotaging all of that. And really, you are knocking off IQ points when you lose an hour of sleep. And again, that I'd refer you to that chapter. It's an excellent commentary on a few of the studies that have been done. But you literally are just your performance from an IQ basis is just dropped off when you're chronically sleep deprived.
Wow. And you think of the challenges and the academic challenges that our kids all have. And if it can come down to reminding them the importance of a good night's rest before all this heavy stuff they walk in every day. Yeah.
For sure.
Very, very helpful. Any other last tie-up things that we should add?
Again, knowledge is power. And I think that another great resource I would really recommend to anybody, parents particularly, is Solve Your Child's Sleep Problems by Richard Ferber, which is just an excellent book on not only the nature of sleep and what to expect at different ages, but also a great discussion of some of these things that we've talked about and how to potentially help refine some of those sleeping patterns for those kids.
Thank you. Again, love resources. Dr. Khoury, thank you for your time. If someone is interested in learning more about you or how to find you, can you give us your info?
Sure. Our contact is at Central Pediatrics. And I said, as stated before, we have two offices, Woodbury and Roseville. I'm in the Woodbury location. You can see it at our website, centralpeds.com. pediatrics.com, or our phone number there is 651-738-0470.
Awesome. And I will add that also in the description of our talk. Um,
Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you for your time. I invite all viewers to subscribe, to follow both. Central Peds has a podcast as well, as does YSB. Thank you so much, folks. Enjoy your day.
Thanks, Mary.